The World of RPGs, Episode 7, Ukraine. Welcome to The World of RPGs, a podcast in which we travel around the globe to visit the local role-playing game scenes. I'm your host, Mo Bots, and in Episode 7 we are going to Ukraine. This episode has a bit of background to it, so the intro has to be a bit longer. Originally, after doing the first 3 episodes of this channel on Southeastern Europe, and the next 3 on Western Asia, all in the neighborhood of where I currently live, meaning quite helpful with the time zones, I had planned to go further away and do a trio on Latin America or East Asia. Then, while working on the Israel episode, I found a post in the Hebrew TTRPG Facebook channel about an online RPG convention in Ukraine. The translate function told me it would have presentations about the gaming scene in Ukraine and games set in the country, all in English. Of course, I had to attend for this channel. RPU, or Role-Playing Ukraine, took place from April 29th to 30th, 2023, and was mostly organized on Discord. There were panels on Ukrainian games, premieres of new RPG supplements, and even interviews with Ukrainian soldiers who are also gamers. I also got to play 2 sessions. One was an adaptation of Lasers and Feelings, called Ark's Destiny, and one the introductory adventure of Symbaroum, both with Ukrainian GMs. After the convention, I even managed to play a game from Ukraine called Arkaterika, GM'd by its author. You heard a session of it in the teaser for this episode. I'll tell you more about this game once we get into the interviews. It was an amazing weekend, and I want to thank the organizers again. I really hope we can have the convention in Kiev next year, meaning in 2024. Now for the short introduction about the country. Ukraine has a population of around 40 million, of which currently about 8 million have fled the country. If you're listening to this in 2023, you will know why. But for anyone listening to my podcast in 2033, I hope you're surviving the heat, and here's some context. Ukraine was part of the Russian-led Soviet Union until 1991. In 2014, Russia attacked Ukraine on 2 fronts. On the one hand, they organized and then actively supported a violent uprising in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. On the other hand, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula. I'm reminding you about these events because you'll notice that my Ukrainian interviewees will refer to the February 2022 attacks as the full-scale invasion by Russia to make it clear that the war did not start in 22 but in 2014. Now you might think, why are people playing games during a war and how can they find time to be interviewed? First of all, as terrible as it might sound, people get used to war. Ukrainians go to restaurants, go to school, they work with a readiness to head towards a bomb shelter if an air raid signal happens. Life goes on, and as in most wars, not every single spot is being attacked at the same time. I conducted the interviews in May and June 2023 with people who were in the Ukrainian capital city Kyiv, a place that in the summer of 23 was attacked by Russian rockets during the night. Several nights, but not 24/7. So people live their life and have time and the necessity to play. Playing games might be one of the ways to cope with the surrounding stress. And that leads us to the answer to the other question. People don't only survive, they need culture and entertainment. A piece of normality and order. TTRPGs are fun, a distraction, and a way of passing your time. At the convention, they even had a panel about using TTRPGs as a form of therapy. Now, I'm not a therapist, so I can't comment on that, but I see the point. You can't just think about the war all the time. The main languages spoken in Ukraine are Ukrainian and Russian. Both are Eastern Slavonic languages written in the Cyrillic alphabet, but they're not mutually intelligible, meaning they're not the same language. After the Russians started their war in 2014, Ukrainians have moved away from speaking Russian, so you notice that we mostly speak about translations into the Ukrainian language. And the actual plays are also all in Ukrainian. There's a sad twist to the language issue in publishing, and we'll cover that too. The main religion in Ukraine is Eastern Orthodox Christianity with Catholic, Jewish, and Muslim minorities. I had previously started all episodes with an interview with the GM from the actual play channel I had used as a teaser, but this time we do it differently and first have another listen to an actual play in Ukrainian before I interview its GM. So here's an excerpt from a current episode of a long-running Dungeons & Dragons campaign.
Легко тобі сказати, Ерден.
Я розумію, що у нас дуже відрізняються ситуації. Але все ще думаю, що це правильний шлях.
На острові люди навіть не зачиняють двері, тому що їм нема чого. У Вестпорті ти не те, що маєш зачинити двері, ти маєш завжди ходити зі зброєю, щоб вижити. Ти кажеш, що це все, ці всі вибори, думки, це все і є ми. Що ж, з цим я погоджуюся, але це для мене і є найгіршим.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Ivan Soprun, and I'm a dungeon master and co-founder of the project on YouTube Dice and Bones, which is basically the biggest TTRPG project in Ukraine so far. We were able to build up a pretty big community, and this is basically the result of many years of hard working. And I've started playing TTRPGs, I guess I was 12 when I was first introduced to Dungeons and Dragons. It was 3rd edition. And then I got to play as a player for a couple times and then became a dungeon master. I wasn't that good at that time. We were just exploring the game mechanics and the general idea of TTRPG, how it should be played, how it could be played, just looking for some answers in the air, experimenting a lot. And then after my university, I got to know very good people, my dear friends, and at some point I invited them to the game. It was my present for their birthdays because they have a lot of them in summer, and they liked it. And since then, we've been playing for 5 years right now. And now we are streaming it. We're publishing our games. We have our channel, a big community, and so on and so forth. When we started our channel, we were on our beginnings. We knew we had to come up with something smart, something clever. And we were trying different namings, different brandings, and something that will both sound clever and well and be related somehow to Dungeons and Dragons. And we were joking about this name, Dice and Bones, because it would translate in Ukrainian like two very similar sounding words, which you can call homonyms, I think. So the words are written absolutely identical. They sound absolutely identical, but they mean different things. It's like fly in English. Fly can be like a process to fly, or like a fly, like a little insect that flies. So the same thing here. Dice and bones, they can be translated as kistke, which is bones, and kistke, dice. So kistke and kistke. And it's just a little joke put in there. I don't think many people get that, because mostly we use the word dice just to call dice. We don't translate that. It's very common to call just dices, and that's it. About our small, little, humble channel, we are currently the biggest YouTube project in Ukraine that concentrates around the theme of TTRPGs. Most of the time we talk and we play Dungeons and Dragons. But in the near future, we will be discussing and perhaps even playing some different systems as well. We have the main product on our channel. It is our long-term, big, massive campaign that we'll be playing since we all got together as people. So that first game that I played with my friends, it was the beginning of the whole era for us as people, the era of D&D. And this one game we're playing for 5 years now, and 3 of these years we're streaming it online. It's a very long and complex story that I have no idea how can I even start to describe it, but basically it's a high fantasy, a very classic game with heroes facing the ultimate evil in the world. And sometimes it resembles the world we're living in right now. Basically, I never planned to include some politics and kind of conflicts around the globe, but right now, any conflict you are playing is somewhat one way or another similar to what Ukrainians face today. Like if you say it's orcs and goblins and all the monsters, it's somehow related, how they act in game and how the invaders of our country, they act. If you say like there is a demon invasion, same thing. Is a devil invasion, same thing. It's just like that. So yeah, we've been playing for a long time, and it's our main product hit there. We have like 60 plus episodes right now recorded. We also have 20 episodes of Adventures Handbook. It could be translated like that, Довідник авантюриста. It's a very helpful series of videos on how to play D&D mechanically. So if a newcomer finds out about the game, it's the first place he or she should go to check out what it's all about, how you can create character, what are the races, the classes, what are the basic rules of movement, death, experience, milestones, weapon, armor, spells, etc., etc., etc. So we basically made 20 videos on that, and also we've made 20 more videos on how to run the game, how to be a DM. This is similar but not equally created content, because it's one thing when you describe a certain rule and it's a written rule. It cannot be played in any other way. A sword that has a d6 damage, it will have a d6 damage. You just rephrase it and put it there. But when you're talking about how to be a dungeon master, there is no such a thing as a direct rule. There's only a direction that you can go, or you can go other direction. So basically in that series, we cover more of our own experience, my own experience. I share it. I give some advice. I share some stories I've had in my life, and I talk about things that I think I am confidently experienced with. That's basically what we do. We also experiment right now, and we have our short series about official D&D lore from Forgotten Realms most of the time, about what are the demons, and you can just watch it in 60 seconds to know a bit more about demons. What are the devils? What are the celestials, or the Mount Celestia, or all the planes and other creatures and all of that. So this is a mini series of shorts, very popular content right now. We also right now finishing the editing of our first craft video. The podcast will not show that little thing right there. That is a ship that we use in our game. Most of the terrains and most of the miniatures we use, I make them myself. Terrains I make from different types of materials, and miniatures I sculpt from polymer clay. And it's baked then, and then it's a solid piece. When it's a solid piece, I paint it and then put out on the battlefield. Yeah, we will have a little video about that, on how to make a ship like that. And if our community will like it, we'll continue doing that. And we will also be doing stuff about our world we're playing in, which called Alvamar. And we have a lot of things to cover there, from basic lore to all different kinds of pantheons and stories and all of that stuff. We have a pretty big community that is interested in this unique world we've been creating for roughly 5 years right now. So that's basically what we are. We do have some products of TTRPG. Most of them, I believe, are bought in other countries and transported here and then resold. Most of the time, I believe it's from Poland, and most of the time it's in English. We don't have that many translations for now, because there is an issue about the licensing. Some people, I heard this story that they tried to contact, for example, Wizards of the Coast to get the rights to make an official translation of D&D 5e. It was like mid-2022, I think. And the response they got was that they had to pay the royalty, which was around $40,000, just to get started. After that, they would translate. The Wizards of the Coast would review the translation, and if they approve, then they would print some amount of copies in USA, and then it would be transported into Ukraine across the globe. And only after that would we get our translated books. And all of the costs would be covered by Ukrainian community. So all the transportation, the print in USA, which has much higher cost than in Ukraine, it was impossible for us to collect that kind of money. And it would be inappropriate even to think about it, providing that we have a lot of issues that should be considered first. So, yeah, we have products, many products. Most of them are brought from other countries and resold these here in small retail stores. Some people try to purchase something from Amazon, from all different platforms. I'm not very competent to speak for all people. I think there are people who are trying to make something else. I know that there are a lot of 3D printing communities in Ukraine. We were just talking about miniature war games, and I know at least 2 communities that are involved in this hobby, and they print the 3D miniatures and they sell them at much lower cost than any retail store sells an official ones.
Yeah, but if you have the English books, do you play in English or Ukrainian?
We play in Ukrainian. We just refer to the rules and some terms in English. So, for example, when we were playing without cameras, our first 2 years of game, it's a perfect question, and I have just the perfect answer. We were playing this first 2 years of our game. And at that time, I was constantly watching Critical Role as one of the main sources of my inspiration. And obviously, I was trying to copy some things to try it in our games. And most of the time, it was referring to the rules or some checks. Like I would say in Ukrainian, okay, Cyril, let's make, and then I switched to English, let's make a constitution saving throw. It would sound like, добре, Cyril, давай тепер зробимо constitution saving throw. It's just so common words to hear and so understandable for many players that it was not an issue for us to use English words. I think 5 to 10% of our playthrough was in English. And sometimes, even now, we have to refer to English original naming of the spell or a certain monster name, just so we understand how we translated this or that. It's a common thing for people in Ukraine.
And the monsters? Do you also translate them or keep them in English?
Something that we are able to translate, we translate, obviously. We actually have been working on translation, and we've made a glossary, which is just a small book, the collection of many terms from the source material in D&D. And we proposed our version of translation, and we published it in DM's Guild about a year ago. We've received a lot of likes from the community, and of course, we've received a lot of discussion, because the translation in Ukrainian language from English is a very tricky thing to do, because there are a lot of discussions to be made about every single possible term or naming of classes, of races, of monsters. I don't know how common it is for other countries, for other languages, but in Ukrainian language, there are a lot of very old-ish words that can be used to represent this term or that class. And also we have a lot of new words, or even some words that Ukrainians took from English. And it's a big question whether or not to translate it one way or another. It's a meme, actually, in our community. Wake me up in 100 years and ask me what our community is talking about, and I will say that it's a translation about sorcerer, wizard, and warlock. Because one of the main translations we use and we proposed was warlock is chaklun, sorcerer is charodi, and the wizard is charivnik. So they sound very similar. Chaklun, charodi, charivnik. All three are starting with the same letter and they have very similar sounding. So it's a bit confusing for a lot of people. So people who are new to these terms and who are especially new to the game, they were trying to find out some other ways to translate these classes. But then some translations, they didn't quite represent what the class meant in the terms of the game, of the system. Others, they were not very well representative in Ukrainian language from the Ukrainian standpoint. Like we have this variant of translation option to translate warlock like a molfar. And it could sound great, it sounds great, but a molfar in Ukrainian culture is, in Ukrainian myths, it's kind of a dark sorcerer that speaks with spirits, but also has some kind of basic understanding with nature. So it's more like a cleric with a bit of nature vibes and spiritual vibes. It's not the best word to represent the most generic warlock in the world, like in generic fantasy. That's why it's called generic fantasy, and that's why it's called warlock, not some very specific name. One of the reasons the translation is very, very hard thing to do.
Since you're getting books in English, have you ever found anything about Ukraine or Ukrainian culture in these books? And if yes, how was it?
That's a great question. Well, I didn't really get any reference to Ukrainian culture yet from any book I've read in English. Well, in generic fantasy, there is no particular and very purposeful representation of Ukrainian culture. For now, I think it might change with time. The one thing I actually saw, and I think it is a kind of a representation of Ukrainian culture, a part of Ukrainian culture, it's a TTRPG of Witcher. This is based on the book materials from Sapkowski, and the visuals are taken from mostly the video game itself. We can link it to one of the most charismatic characters in that. It's actually a bunch of characters. One of the main characters from a Witcher 3 video game, and it's Olgierd von Everec and his company. It's a bunch of free people. They're not bandits, but they are free from any taxes or any government. They're not below anyone. They don't serve anyone. They roam around, but they have their own land. It's a very interesting concept of this adventuring lifestyle that we can clearly see in Ukrainian history, and everybody knows about Cossacks. Ukrainian Cossacks are basically that. They are adventurers who roam around. They have no empire above them. They didn't serve Turks. They didn't serve Polacks. They didn't serve Russians. They were independent in their own way. They had some kind of democracy mixed with elective monarchy style of government, and war bands were formed. But at the same time, they had this not a sadistic banditism lifestyle, but more like a knight-ish lifestyle with rules, with first constitution in the world, Constitution of Philip Orlik. And we see that CD Projekt Red, they inspired by these Cossacks to create this company of Olgierd von Everec. And it is involved in one way or another, or can be involved in TTRPG Witcher. But this might be the only time I've ever seen something actually somehow connected to Ukraine.
But there's also something coming out in English now about Ukraine, isn't it? The Vaesen Ukraine book.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not a huge fan of Vaesen, even though I've played it, and I'm a huge fan of the masters I've been playing with, and they are terrific. I'm not into this horror detective gaming, but I've heard about it. I've seen some promotions, and it's beautiful, actually. We have not only Vaesen, but we have this thing. And the book is the bestiary of the mythical bestiary of Ukrainian lands. And it involves all kind of creatures, all kind of very interesting monsters and fiends, and all of that from Ukrainian myths, from different parts of Ukraine. For all of these creatures, this project of my dear friend, it has its illustration. These are different illustrations from all kinds of artists. Some artists, they made one of the creatures, some made several creatures, but also these cards that I hold here, they fold. If you unfold it, you can see stats for D&D 5e. So yeah, you can use something called like Zlidny or Zlidin. These are small creatures that occupy the building and they bring a bad fortune. And it is very hard to get rid of them because they spawn more and more of their brethren and they are completely invisible if they are not under the direct sunlight. It's a very interesting creature to add. We have here all kinds of creatures. Some of them might be familiar because the culture of Asian countries and European countries, they interconnected. So we have our version of a dragon-ish creature, which is Perelesnik. It's a fiery creature, and it's both actually a fiend and a dragon. It has many forms, and one of the forms being the actual serpent with many legs and this huge hairstyle of flames of different colors. And it has also a form of very seductive male that convinces women to go with him, and then it's these poor girls. So yeah, we have like, I don't know, 40, 50 of these different creatures right here. And I cannot show you the book right now, but there is a book that covers the myths about these creatures, their ecology, their appearance, sometimes their interactions with different other creatures. Like this creature here is Chuhaister, a very interesting creature. And it haunts another type of creature, which is Mavka, which is like a mermaid of Ukraine, but just a little bit different. Mavka is forest spirit. It primarily hunts young males. It's a seductive. It's like a combination of succubus and dryad and a little bit of mermaid or siren like that. And this Chuhaister creature, it hunts specifically Mavkas. They are not very friendly to people either. They are just neutral to people, but Mavkas are basically their food. And we have a whole book that covers that. Very dear friend of mine organized it and put it all together. It was a very big volunteer-ish project with most of money they've collected, or even more, I think all of the money they collected, it went to charity to support Ukrainians on the front line. It was a very beautiful project and very successful, I would say, in terms of Ukraine. To understand that Ukraine is not that big. So when you hear that some project collected some several $1,000s, it might not look like much in USA, but it's a very big number for Ukraine. The name of the creator is Felix. He is known also as Felixora. He has his own channel in YouTube. He covers there different kinds of creatures from Ukrainian myths. He makes retrospectives on his project. He creates his own world, basically Ukrainian myth-inspired world, if you might say that.
So you mentioned collecting money for the front lines. Are there any other effects of the war on role-playing?
Sure. Many of the listeners, they could hear about the blackouts during the winter this year. And it was a very hard time for all of the Ukrainians. And especially, of course, if your hobby is somewhat linked to the fact that whether you have electricity or not. Basically, every time the light went off, we couldn't continue to record, we couldn't continue to play, and many of our sessions during that period, if you will watch our channel, you will see many cuts. 3 to 4 cuts per video, and it's smooth. Yeah, we've tried to make it as smooth as possible, as unseeming as possible. I cannot find the right word for that, but obviously it's there. Sometimes it affected the editing process. Of course, it's not that critical because this involved only one person. And when it was shooting the actual game, it was involving 5 to 6 people at the same time. And everyone canceled their plans just to come to the studio and record it. There was no any possible way to do that. It was pretty dark times, I would say. For many years, I didn't feel like I belong in any community because there was no community. It is very common thought that every single nation here, including Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and all of different countries, they are interconnected and they have everything in common. They have the same language they speak, they have the same culture they share. No, it's not the case. And it's definitely not the case in terms of TTRPG communities. Because back then, before the full-scale invasion and before war started in 2014, I've had no idea where was I, where were all the people I could play with. There were just patches of different small local communities that were not interconnected, that were not linked together under one idea. And there was a lot of uncertainty and nothing else. So basically no community. And this is the case right now in Russia. There is no community in Russia whatsoever. There are little small patches of D&D or TTRPG communities. It depends on location mostly. There are 5 to 6 places in Moscow, I think, that are serving as these pinpoints of communities, but there is nothing globally going on. And for Ukraine, it's a very different thing. Especially during this full-scale invasion, Ukrainian content creators, Ukrainian volunteers and gamers and players and soldiers, they all came together to create something of our own, something that belonged to us and only us. It's a very common idea right now in Ukraine to refuse everything that is Russian. To refuse it because anything you use made in Russia, it means that one way or another you support Russia, one way or another you support it, maybe not directly, but indirectly with some kind of money, even a small amount of money, then transfers into military and then transfers in the sheltering of our cities. So basically, we don't accept any kind of Russian language, any kind of Russian product right now. And it pushes us to create our own, to create Ukrainian channels, to create Ukrainian YouTube, to create Ukrainian podcasts and Ukrainian books. Even for some people, I think it's Ukrainian tabletop RPG systems. I believe there are many of them born right now or even publishing. So, yeah, I think it is important for the world to know and understand that Ukrainian community is very strong. We may be not strong in numbers, but every single one of us is like an Astartes in Warhammer 40k. We are super soldiers both in our everyday life and in TTRPG. We are very passionate if we like something. And it shows because this project of these creatures of Ukrainian myths, it's a huge project. It would cost maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars in USA. It costs a lot less in Ukraine, of course, but the main point is that the leaders of this project, they didn't get any money. They didn't want any money. All they wanted is to create something beautiful. And they did it. Even though there were tons of obstacles, even though there were a lot of shit going on, even, not because of war, not because of that, but despite of war, despite of blackouts, of different challenges, financial problems, we are continuing on. We are pushing forward and we're trying to make things better for us, for all the people in the world, for our community, and every single person contributes something, even if it's a small donation or just a comment in the comment section. It's always about passion that basically describes us the best.
So how do you get games in Ukraine? I talked with an employee from one of the country's distributors and publishers.
Hi, my name is Ala Kostavska. I am a project editor in Geekach Publishing. This is publishing house which specializes mainly in board games. It was like board game shop previously, but then it evolutionated into board game publishing and now also take part in publishing TTRPG. So I'm also now work with TTRPG. So my story with role-playing games also started after board games. So I kind of play board games, I think around 10 years, maybe a little bit more. And I played the RPG around 5 years. I played Savage Worlds, Dungeons and Dragons, Slayers, Ten Candles, Blades in the Dark. Geekach Publishing collects best world board games into Ukrainian language and publish Ukrainian versions of these games. And we have a lot of board games from top store, from best board game geek games, for example, Dune Imperium or World of War of the Ring or Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror, and so on. So I think for now it's around 100 games were published already. And we just start to work with TTRPG. So we only published for now quick start for Savage Worlds and a quick start for Call of Cthulhu. And we're going to publish Call of Cthulhu full series and Savage Worlds and Savage Worlds Deadlands and few different smaller TTRPG like Questlands is for children or Flabbergasted.
Yeah, I thought about supporting it on Kickstarter, but then I thought I wouldn't play it myself, so I didn't, but I know what it is.
Yeah, it looks very nice. And also we're going to work with Cyberpunk Red and Witcher. We wait for our partners give us all files, and we also start to work with these two role-playing games.
So these are all translated from English. Are you planning to do any Ukrainian games, specific ones?
We would like to, but it's really hard because it's a long process, a whole development and testing and so on. So we have some plans to work with Ukrainian community and maybe choose something to publish, but for now it's only translated projects. But in Ukrainian community, we have some Ukrainian developed projects. You may hear about Archeterica, or I think maybe months ago or so, a new publishing appeared in Ukrainian market named Bordova. And this is publishing which is going to work mostly with Ukrainian products, mostly with TTRPG. They also will translate Vampire Masquerade and Goblins and Kobolds, but I will do Ukrainian projects as well.
Are you considering doing any Ukrainian-specific supplements, maybe? Or is it just direct translation?
It depends. Like, for example, in Call of Cthulhu, we just translate everything that we have because setting is rooted in American culture and in Lovecraft works, yes. But when we do this Flabbergasted, we will adapt some things to maybe Ukrainian, some jokes and so on. And also when we will do The Witcher, we also will use maybe some Ukrainian folklore and so on. It's only my thoughts. It's just in progress. So I can tell you that this will be for sure something like this. But I suggest that we will do this.
What were the big challenges in translation?
The biggest challenge for us is the terminology, mostly because we are the first publishing who publish and who start translate and publish TTRPG, and we have no terminology because Ukrainian players use Russian books or like Polish or English and so on. So they use those terminology, and now we need to create our own new terminology, and this is very complicated and hard because we can translate some terms, but a lot of fans not going to approve this, and we have some discussions in our community. So like in Savage Worlds, it is very hard because they have a lot of terms with similar meaning, and it's really hard to find the direct words in our language. So we have a lot of troubles with this. We have a lot of discussions inside of community and also in our translated group because Savage Worlds was translated by Shlag Betraf. Shlag Betraf is Ukrainian community of translators who work mostly with video games. So they do Ukrainian subtitles, they localize video games. So like, for example, they will localize Cyberpunk video game. And also they will translate Cyberpunk TTRPG. So translation video game and role-playing game will be with the same terms. And there are a lot of translators in this group, and there are a lot of thoughts. So it was very hard. As for the Call of Cthulhu is, I think, easier because we already translated and sent to the print. We received 2 games for now, but we're also waiting for the third. So we had Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, based on Lovecraft works. And we have books. I think most of the Lovecraft works are translated into Ukrainian. So we one part we're using this literal translation, and we also using our terms from this board game. So we have like half of the terms from these 2 sources, and this is easier because we work with Questlinks. This is board game for children, and it was quite fun because there are very simple terms and words, and the hardest moment with this game was to do it simple but funny and understandable for the children, because this game is for children, I think 7 and older. So we need to create translation which will suit all the categories of children.
So do you have role-playing shops in Ukraine, or how do you get the books?
We don't have like role-playing shops. We have comic shops, we have board game clubs, and some bookstores. But if you want to buy some TTRPG games or some supplies, dice, and so on, you need to find a proper comic book shop, or mostly it's board game shops or board game clubs. So you can just go play and buy something in the same place. But I hope that in nearest future we will have more games, so we will have more shops where you can find this. We have this constant problem, usually like book publishing industry. This was years ago, before our book market grown strong how it is now. So a lot of Russian agents bought rights for Ukrainian and Russian territory, and Belarusian as well. So they try to buy rights for this big territory, post-Soviet countries. They bought rights, and we can't buy this rights because they already sold. And we have the same situation with board games, maybe like even last 3 years before the full-scale invasion. For example, board game Nemesis wasn't in our market because Hobby World, this is big Russian publisher, they bought rights for Russian and for Ukrainian as well, and they published Ukrainian version, and it was awful. So now, after the invasion, rights for the Polish agent who managed the rights for Nemesis resold these rights for Ukrainian language, and Geekach going to publish Nemesis in Ukrainian. And other games like Everdell, like Welcome to, also was sold to Russia. And the same situation was with role-playing games. Like we haven't them because it was quite expensive for Ukrainian publisher to buy this game, because we only can publish like 1,000 copies for first print run, because we don't know how people will buy it, because no one did it before. So we just need to try to publish this first 1,000, and we will see, do we have demand? And if you publish book with small print run, the cost of each book are higher. And Russian publishers, they work with a lot of countries who use Russian language, so they can allow themselves to publish 10,000. I don't know, like it's kind of suggestion. I think maybe 5,000 at least. And then the cost of one book is quite low because of this big print run. So it was hard for us, even if we will buy the right, it was hard for us to compete for the customer, because customer can choose cheaper version over expensive. So it was first problem, and second problem was that problem with the rights, because, for example, Witcher TTRPG, we can't buy rights for TTRPG Witcher because Russia bought this right. It wasn't available for us at all. And now where we clean our market and we haven't Russian books, Russian games, and so on at all, it's easier for us to buy these rights and easier for us to sell these rights. And it was very significant change, because if we will analyze our selling data and so on, so overall number of sales now smaller than was before, because obvious reasons, like we have war here, we have missile attacks and so on. So a lot of people lose their works, a lot of people go abroad or look for something better, and it's okay, we have problems with economics, so less people can and won't buy something, board games and TTRPG in Ukraine now. But if we will analyze like number of Ukrainian products, like Ukrainian board games and Ukrainian books, but I can tell you about board games, we sell this year more than like in 2021 or 2020, like, because 2021 is like the full year for the invasion. So even the number of board games which were sold is less, but number of Ukrainian board games is bigger. So we have this equation of the demand, and we see that we can sell more products. And I think that last year it was very hard year for all of us. Publishing house company relocate, because originally I myself live in Kiev, so in capital, and I'm now also speak with you from Kiev. But the publisher and like the main office and the warehouse was located in Melitopol, and Melitopol is the city in the east Ukraine, and now Melitopol is under Russian occupation. And a whole warehouse with whole our boxes and a whole our products left there. And people, members of the publishing house who live here, they managed to relocate. They managed to move on, so they can work from different place. And the main office now in Ternopil, it's a different city in Western Ukraine. So we're working like this from different places. And yeah, it was kind of very hard because publishing lose a lot because of this Russian occupation. They lose like a lot of like houses and warehouse and so on. So they start from zero, and I can just say that we have great community of publishers in Ukraine, because like when a publisher relocate to this different city, a lot of different publishers who make games, they just gave us games for selling like without any advance. So we have our shop, and we have big internet shop, which are one of the biggest sources of the finance. So it's very important for us to keep this online shop functional. So a lot of different publishers gave us their products to sell without advance, and after we sell, we then only can sell them some money. And it was very helpful. Wasn't work for a few months. We just like froze whole process and just wait to see what happened. And then we start working. I think it was in the late spring, maybe May or so on. And we did a lot of jobs. So I think maybe around 30 or 40 projects we translated and prepared for the publishing. And it's a really big number, because like for the previous few years, it also was like the same number, but that was for few years, and this was only for 1 year. And now we have a lot of new projects and not a lot of new games to do. So I think it's optimistic note.
Among the popular games in Ukraine are Dungeons and Dragons, of course, Call of Cthulhu, Witcher, Savage Worlds, Vampire the Masquerade, and Cyberpunk Red. Concerning games that were written in Ukraine, we already heard about the Vaesen supplement. There's also Space Cowboy Bounty Hunter, which looks a bit like Cowboy Bebop. The game includes a space colony called Mariupolis, named after the Ukrainian city Mariupol. I think it's currently only available in Ukrainian though. Then there are the mini-games Super 8 publishes on their itch.io account, such as Atlas, Names, Six, Tango Aperol, Witchbook, The Last Tournament, The Owl on a White Sheet, In the Clouds, and Red Noir Magic. I think Witchbook and Red Noir Magic are available in English, the others in Ukrainian. Finally, we got Archaeterica, of which we heard an actual play in the teaser last episode, and I had the honor of getting to play the game with its author as the GM. So here's my interview with him.
So hello, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm known as Anton Relict in our community. I've been playing role-playing games for, I guess, 10 years. I started from LARPing, but then I understood that playing with your friends near the table and throwing dice and not sleeping in the woods, it is much more better and easier, better experience. And I always considered myself a creative person. So I understood that TTRPG games, it is a great way to be creative, to create new content, new worlds, to share my ideas. And that is what the most interesting for me in TTRPG. In fact, I'm a long-time fan of Warhammer, and I was playing Warhammer as a war game since school. And in fact, I can tell that my first tabletop role-playing games, it is when I with friends, we took our models and we tried not only to do a battle, but generate some kind of scenario, generate some kind of story. We gave names to characters and we tried to do like story campaign for them. And then I saw the rule books for proper Warhammer roleplay. I was more into 40k Warhammer. I saw that there are games about Inquisition, and I was interested, but not enough to start playing it. I saw that there are games about Imperial Guard. Yeah, it was more interesting than playing Inquisition. And then I saw that there is a game, Black Crusade, about playing Chaos Space Marines, and I understood, okay, I have to try this. I have to play this because it was very hard to imagine what would be the game. So I saw many tropes of fantasy role-playing, but what would be the role-playing of space Satanists? It was interesting for me to try and find it. So and I started playing this game. I played about 5 sessions a week, almost all of them at night. Because of this, I almost dropped out of university, but everything ended successfully. It was very hard to get books in Ukraine on those times. I was not familiar with ways to order from abroad, and there were no books sold in Ukraine in shops. That's all what I can say on this topic. I'm author of a game named Architectura. It is a game of 19th century secret societies. It's about secret societies, occultism in decorations of Napoleonic War in alternative setting. This is a game, non-class game, based on 2d6, and I consider it being somewhat popular in Ukraine. Here we have our own community. We play for about 5 years. We played mostly in a format of open table, but now there are different GMs playing their own campaigns. I like to think of this game being original enough to have its own spirit. And currently I am working on translation, English translation, and I am moving toward the goal of releasing this game on Kickstarter. So the focus of Architectura, it is a game about secret societies and the thing we call penumbra theater. So there are things that are unknown to most population. There are things that are kept in secrecy, and there are some groups of people who try to profit from these secrets. And players, they are mostly or representatives of some secret society. They are either fighting against secret society or they are just random witnesses of really obscure events caused by activity of some secret society. And mostly this is games of spies, detective games, psychological thrillers. But this game, because of its broad setting, is easily adapted to, for example, expeditions, adventures based on expeditions to a new world. It's easily adapted to be in some kind of criminal drama, political drama, and any other play style. But the main focus, it is spy games and managing your own secret society. My inspiration was definitely Napoleonic Wars. I studied about Napoleonic Wars while studying in school. I read many books. I played computer games such as Cossacks, Napoleonic Wars. This game was made in Ukraine by Ukrainians, and there is not much you can do in RTS to be original, but this game is great. And a few of my friends, we were working together on a setting. We were trying to find some new niche to explore. So there are a lot of medieval games, there are a lot of sci-fi games, there are few Victorian games, but there's nearly nothing about Napoleonic Wars time. And for me, this time is really interesting because it is the break of times. It is when society changed drastically. When yesterday you were servant of the king, today you are citizen of a republic. Yesterday the religion and church ruled the world. Today the science and rational thinking is cherished. And this is very interesting time, the time when everything is changing and you can decide your future by your own ways. So we decided that this time of this break of different times, it is the best time for secret societies to flourish and to do their shady dealing.
I played in the session with you, which was based on The Good Mayor, which is one of the introductory scenarios, and it felt like it's in a place like Galicia in Western Ukraine or Eastern Poland in this border region.
Maybe. The thing is that Ukraine, that time, it was really divided between different countries, between different empires, and every empire tried to put their own rules on the Ukraine to govern in its own way. And this was a really hard time for Ukrainians as a nation. And this is one of the reasons why in our setting there are no direct images of different nations. So there's no country that I can tell that, okay, this is like Ukraine and this country is a fictional, I don't know, like Germany or fictional Great Britain. Everything is really, really mixed. And our title country of our setting, it is the Russian Republic. It is really the mix of post-revolutionary French Republic, of Eastern Europe, and like Western parts of Ukraine. So some crazy mix. But I believe that such approach, so he's taken like pseudo-historical setting, but giving the GM and players opportunity to invent their own countries, their own historical figures, such approach gives great creative freedom and allows you to play the game not being a professional historian. So when a new GM wants to make his own scenario in Architectura, they always ask me, tell us about like this history of this place. And I tell them, you can create your own kingdoms. There are enough of blank spots to fill up with your own fantasy. And that would be not possible if we played strictly historical setting. We use 2d6. I believe this is the best dice set ever for mostly humorous reasons. And the strongest part of the game, it is the way you create your character. You create your character building him up from narrative attributes, and you can make up them on your own. So, for example, you want to play as a gentleman chirurgeon who travels provincial countryside, and you can select two narrative attributes for your character. One is gentleman, second is chirurgeon. You made up appropriate narrative talents for your character, and voila, your character is ready. So it is gentleman chirurgeon with all the narrative talents you want him to have, and with burdens, which are like weak points of your character, which you also can make up your own. And you receive very original character, which is tailored to your taste. And you can make up any narrative attributes, burdens, talents, while GM understand what is your idea of them, and other players at the table also agree that they understand what you put up in that. And our veteran players, they usually compete in doing the most narrow, the most interesting narrative attributes and using them properly in the game. And your character all the time receives new narrative attributes. They receive new narrative talents. They develop. And in 5, 10, 25 sessions, so this character become really broad, interesting character. So he's not just like progressing through level. He was fighter level 1, he is now fighter level 5. No, he is now a very broad character who has like 9 different narrative attributes. Each narrative attribute has like from 5 to 9 to 10 narrative talents, each of which help you to do your narrative tests, easier influence the game mechanics. Also, we have interesting game mechanics for combat. So I believe that the narrative part where you explore when you interact with NPC, this part of game has to be very free. It has to be dynamic. And that's why our rule set for such narrative exploration is very flexible. But when it comes to the combat, I believe that players deserve to have strict rules to fight their enemies. And we made strict rules of combat fencing. We have 6 fencing styles, which each has its own set of 6 fencing moves. When you attack somebody, he has right to make a reaction choosing from the moves of his fencing styles. Also, we use the system of action points. So the same way as it is used in Fallout 2. So you have some action points to spend on different actions, but each round you get random 2d6 points of action points, and the character with the highest amount of action points is doing his actions first. Then he spends his action points, and somebody else will step up and do his actions. And this sounds as risky and unbalanced because somebody can get a lot of action points, somebody can get low action points, but in fact this gives a really interesting tactical situation every turn. Every turn the situation change. You have to plan carefully for what you are doing. You can learn new fencing styles and you can learn new combat talents, which you cannot make up them. You have to select them from the list, and we have more than 150 combat talents that can help you to tailor the experience that you want. There is no one strict build. There are different ways, really different ways to play. And you also can arm your character by a really great arsenal of historical weapons that are as much accurate as it is possible for playable and enjoyable game. In Ukrainian, the rules are written fully. There are just some places in like chapter for GM that I need to add a few things, maybe to write a little bit more of lore, a little bit more of narrative stuff, but rules-wise, the rules are finished. Also, if we are talking about the big rules, we have rules for secret society management. We have rules for occult activities such as doing rituals, doing medicine experiments on people, doing meta-engineer when you do experiments with otherworldly devices. So we have big rules for you to play secret society and to do X-Files stuff in the creation of Napoleonic era. It is quite problematic for me to do the translation of the whole rules. There are more than 600 pages of content in Ukrainian language. And we decided to move it the same way when I started Ukrainian version. I started with a version which was 20 pages long, and we played like for a year in these 20 pages. Then I added a few more, something more, and then it became this full rule book that our Ukrainian players play now. And I hope we will move the same way with the English version. We will start with quick start rules. And if the game is interesting for Western audience, then we will move to the translation of the full rules. And that will take a lot of effort because I try to do really a good translation using both Ukrainian translators and editors and English native speakers to check for this text to sound not as foreign written text.
Yeah, and I have sampled the game, and from what I've seen from the quick starter and from the session, I think it's fully finished and it would be interesting for a Western audience because it has a good design and it has good artwork and it has a really intriguing setting. I actually want to know more about these secret societies and the occultism. It's pretty close to the stuff I'm interested in. I'm not the biggest fan of 2d6. I'm more a d10 person. I had to say that, but because you can do such nice percentage things with them. But it's fine as long as it's not a D&D 5th edition clone again. I mean, I'm not against D&D, but there should be more than that. Anything else?
I can tell that about the way of creating this game. Really, there are not many games created in Ukraine. I can say that we have pretty active Ukrainian community of role players who eagerly unite in groups, in clubs, and play together. And there are a few great products, few Ukrainian games, but mostly there are small projects. And this was a really big challenge to create such a big game. And I understand that big games, they are not in fashion. I clearly understand that modern players have a lot of games to choose from, a lot of games they want to try, and everybody has so little time for our hobby. And to delve into a big, deep game, it is pricey for your time. But either way, I had a great support from our Ukrainian community. We played, I think, in total more than 1,000 of game sessions by different players, by different player groups. And as creator, I was mostly interested in creating a deep game, which is like easy to start, hard to master. I feel that we made it. And because there was so little of games to influence us, I believe that questions of art style and the questions of game mechanics, Architect is original enough to be interesting as a standalone game. I understand that there are a lot of great games on the web for players to choose from. And one of the strongest points of Architect, its style, it's like flavor of secret societies. It is funny for me because when I visited conventions, I had printed rules with me, like there were 100 pages with illustrations made by our local artist Alexei Shibak. And those are great black and white pencil-made illustrations, which are very grotesque, very obscure, sinister. And I saw many people like opening the book, going through pages, not reading anything, but seeing illustrations and saying stuff like, oh, this is a great game. Such a great game, good illustrations. And I understand that everybody does his first impression by illustrative material. And that's why we work to do the live action video, which is as much illustrative as we could do. I hope this video will go live soon. Maybe when the podcast will be published, the video will be published too, and we could share the link. I want to tell about a dilemma that I had as a creator in Ukraine. So you asked me about where we bought books, and I answered to you that it was not possible to buy any role-playing books in Ukraine. Today it is possible. Today there are shops, virtual. I guess I saw 2 or 3 books in tabletop brick and mortar shops. Like I saw D&D and Call of Cthulhu. The reason is the gaming market in Ukraine is really small. If you Google average salary in Ukraine, you will be really shocked by it. And there is not much money that Ukrainian players can spend on books. For example, book that costs $60, it is really serious investments for Ukrainian players. And I dreamt of publishing Architecture. And when I did calculations, I understood that there is no way I could publish it only in the Ukrainian language and not financial suicide. So I always from the beginning understood that I will have to publish this game in English. Also, there was a brief moments when we considered publishing this game in Russian language because there was a big influence of Russian community because of internet, because of some of popular tabletop role-playing game stuff being in Russian. But that quickly changed. We quickly forgot about that idea because we understood that we have to have Ukrainian version for Ukrainian players. So there are like 40 million Ukrainians and they deserve having this Ukrainian game in their own language. And we want to move to the Western players, to those players who understand English, and we need to do English localization. And that is one of the biggest challenges for me right now. So I'm trying to do English localization, trying to reach out to Western communities, to make this game really global. We will start with English, we will start with Ukrainian. Also, I'm thinking about Polish because Polish TTRPG scene is very active, and we really have a great respect for Poland for all the help, all the support we have in these difficult times. And as a token of gratitude, I'm thinking also of doing a Polish translation, even knowing that 80% of Polish players perfectly speak and read English.
So thank you for listening to the World of RPGs. A special thanks goes out to the Ukrainian gamers who talked to me, Ivan, Alla, and Anton. The music was Battle of the Dragons by Thomas Mutsiu. As for podcast recommendations, I am running out of RPG or fantasy and science fiction related channels, so I just want to recommend Imaginary Worlds again. They have 2 episodes on fantasy and science fiction literature from Ukraine, which are a great companion to this episode. As always, you can find the links to the games, websites and YouTube channels I mentioned in the show notes. By the way, I'm considering retiring from the social medium formerly known as Twitter, so I'd be happy for any suggestions for an alternative. Subscribe to this channel wherever you get your podcasts, rate and review, and get ready for episode 8. The next country is kind of a surprise candidate, because I hadn't planned on doing this one next, but some connections came up, and you'll see, this is the first time I have no clue about the language or what they're playing. I think it's D&D, but we'll hear more about what they're doing there in the next episode.
ანუ შენც გააგორე.
ო
კაი.
ჯიბეში ჩაიდო ეგრე.
ორკი. ანუ ეს ეხა ხდება რა. მინდა ჯერ სანამ განხორციელებას გადავალთ, რომ დარონმა გამიგოროს მენტაური ამტანობა, იმიტომ რომ როგორც გახსოვთ, არა მეცა, როგორ იყო მუქარის წინააღმდეგ მოქმედებს მენტაური ამტანობა და ქარიზმის წინააღმდეგ ქარიზმა მოქმედებს. გააგორე შენი ქარიზმა.
Tam შვიდი უჩე.
ო, კაი, სიგარო, რა მისაბმე.
ბოდიში კამერა გადაფრ.
აი, ეხლა ნახეთ რა ხდება. ორკი დაეძგერა ამ ბოჭყუბრებს. ეხლა კამერას ესე მოკიდეს ხელი და გამოწიეს უკან. ესენი იქაჩებიან ჯერაც ციხლებს იქნებიან. შემდეგ რაუნდშიც ეცდებით რომ იგივები გააგოროთ და თქვა ჭიდილი დაიწყოთ ან რაღაცა. და შემდეგ რაუნდში ფიცხები ვინც ხართ, ანუ მოჭყუბრები ფიცხები რა, არა, მადრესა და ებას შორის დარონ შორის გონი მარტო დარონია. ფიცხები ვინც ხართ, აი მე გამიგორებ იმას, რა ქვია, მენტაური ამტანობის ჩეკს გადახვალ თუ არა, იმაში